April 15, 1945. The air in the Rhine Valley hangs heavy with the scent of damp earth and distant cadite, mingled with the faint, acrid tang of unwashed wool from uniforms long past their press. Grey skies press low over the skeletal remains of a bombed-out rail yard near Remagen, where the Ludendorff Bridge, once a defiant span across the river, now lies twisted in the current. Like a fallen giant, a procession of women, their faces gaunt under the brims of field caps, shuffles along a muddy path flanked by American jeeps. Their grey skirts, mud-splattered and threadbare, whisper against the gravel. One pauses, her hand trembling as she clutches a frayed seam, eyes lifting to the horizon, where olive-drab figures move with purposeful stride. A soft sob escapes her lips, carried away by the chill wind, as the first rays of a hesitant sun catch the gleam of brass buttons on the strangers' jackets. In that moment, the war's unyielding grind yields to something unforeseen, a tear tracing the dust on a cheek. Not from fear, but from a shattering recognition. This encounter, raw and unscripted, marked one of the quiet fractures in the edifice of the Third Reich. By spring 1945, the Wehrmacht's auxiliary forces, the Wehrmachthelferin, had swelled to nearly 500,000 women, pressed into service not by choice, but by the relentless arithmetic of total war. These were the Lightning Girls, as the German public derisively called them, young women from farms and factories, clerks and switchboard operators, funneled into the machinery of invasion and defense. Recruited initially as volunteers in 1939, their numbers exploded after the 1943 Total Mobilization Decree, when Reich Labor Minister Fritz Sockel decreed that every able-bodied woman between 17 and 50 must contribute to the war effort. They manned anti-aircraft batteries, decoded signals in forward outposts, and typed orders for the Eastern Front. Their grey tunics a somber echo of the male soldier's field dress. Yet beneath the utilitarian fabric lay the ironclad ideology of National Socialism. Women as vessels of the Volk, bearers of Aryan purity, forbidden from the front lines lest they sully the masculine myth of the soldier. Adolf Hitler himself proclaimed in a 1930 speech to the National Socialist Women's Organization that the woman's world is her husband, her family, her children, and her home. A doctrine etched into law by the 1933 Law for the Encouragement of Marriage and the subsequent quotas limiting female university enrollment to a mere 10%. But as Allied forces breached the Siegfried Line in March 1945, the illusion crumbled. Operation Lumberjack, the U.S. Ninth Army's push across the Rhine, captured over 300,000 German troops in weeks, among them thousands of these auxiliary women. Scattered and shell-shocked, they surrendered in clusters. Operators from Luftwaffe signal corps, nurses from field hospitals, radar technicians from coastal defenses, American military police, under orders from General Dwight D. Eisenhower to process prisoners humanely, per the Geneva Convention, herded them toward temporary camps along the river. It was in these makeshift enclosures, barbed wire strung between bombed barns and requisitioned villages, that the paths of vanquished and victor converged, not in the thunder of artillery, but in the stark juxtaposition of uniforms. Did the true measure of defeat reveal itself for the German women? The sight of their American counterparts shattered the brittle veneer of propaganda they had long internalized. They had been schooled to envision the enemy as a degenerate horde, the Bolsheviks as Asiatic barbarians, the Western Allies as plutocratic weaklings softened by excess. American women, in particular, were painted as frivolous sirens, liberated from duty by a decadent democracy that squandered its daughters on jazz halls and lipstick factories. The American Woman sneered a 1942 issue of the Nazi magazine Signal, trades her cradle for a cigarette, her home for a paycheck fit only for the assembly line, not the altar of the race. These were McThelferin, many barely out of their teens, had donned their own uniforms expecting to embody disciplined service within the Reich's unassailable order, trained at replacement depots like the one in Oberammergau. They learned Morse code and map reading, but always with the caveat that their role was ancillary, a temporary sacrifice to preserve the eternal verities of hearth and fatherland. They anticipated, if defeat loomed, a harsh but dignified captivity, perhaps labor in distant fields, guarded by stern men in khaki, their own grey skirts a badge of stoic endurance. What they did not foresee was the mirror held before them, women in olive drab, not as subordinates, but as equals in rank and resolve. And there they stood, the American servicewomen of the Women's Army Corps, and the women accepted for volunteer emergency service WACs and WAVES, over 350,000 strong by war's end. Their tailored jackets and seersucker skirts a testament to a nation's audacious inclusivity. These were no auxiliaries. Since July 1943, when Congress integrated the WAC into the regular army, they held full military status, drawing equal pay and pensions, serving from clerical desks in Washington to weather stations in England. Their uniforms, designed by Mainbocher for the WAVES and navy blue wool serge with fitted waist and seamed stockings, exuded an elegance born of deliberate intent. Mildred Blanche McAfee, director of the WAVES, had insisted on a classy silhouette to counter the era's suspicions, ensuring that the jacket's notched lapels and the skirt's precise pleats conveyed not just functionality, but poise. The WAC's olive drab ensemble, though initially criticized for its boxy cut, evolved under the watchful eye of Oveta Culp Hobby, its first director, into a symbol of quiet authority, a herringbone twill skirt paired with a garrison cap, emblazoned with Pallas Athena, goddess of wisdom and just war. As these women processed the influx of prisoners sorting manifests, distributing rations, coordinating medical checks, they moved with the unhurried confidence of those who had volunteered, not been conscripted. Historical records, preserved in the declassified archives of the U.S. Army's Office of the Provost Marshal General, capture the immediacy of these meetings. In a May 1945 report from Camp Rimini, Montana, where 450 German POWs, including 23 were McThelferin, arrived after transatlantic shipment 1 auxiliary, identified only as Oberhelferin LS, broke down upon sighting a WAC sergeant. "I thought women in uniform were a sign of decay," she confessed through an interpreter, her voice fracturing as tears welled. "But you wear it as if it were natural, as if the world bends to allow it." Another account, from the Fort Hunt Interrogation Center in Virginia, details a group of 15 captured signal women from the 9th Army's auxiliary pool, presented with a lineup of American servicewomen for processing. They stared in stunned silence before one murmured, "They are dressed for battle and beauty both. How can a nation that clothes its women so trust them with its secrets?" These testimonies, corroborated by eyewitness affidavits from WAC Lieutenant Colonel Mary A. Halloran, reveal not mere surprise, but a visceral unraveling. Rations logs from Rhine camps note unexplained absences, German women lingering at distribution points, fingers tracing the seams of American skirts, as if touching the fabric might unlock its promise. Yet woven through these encounters was the humble Hershey's chocolate bar, a pocketed staple in every G's kit and now extended by servicewomen to their charges. More than mere confection, it embodied the prodigious abundance of the arsenal of democracy, a nation that, in 1944 alone, produced 24 billion pounds of chocolate from cocoa imports untouched by U-boat torpedoes. For the German auxiliaries, rationed to ersatz coffee and turnip soup since 1942. The bar's smooth milkiness, its wrapper emblazoned with the simple script "A treat from home," was a revelation. £1 in a letter smuggled to a Swiss Red Cross observer and later archived in Bern, described unwrapping it under the gaze of a waves yeoman. The chocolate melted on my tongue like forbidden sunlight, while she in her crisp blue stood tall, handing out more as if they grew on trees. It was not just sweetness. It was the taste of a world where women served not in shadows, but in the full light of plenty. The bar recurred in diaries and reports a shared morsel melting hierarchies. Its creamy interior a quiet rebuke to the Reich's austere creed. In the flickering light of Camp lanterns, it became the unassuming talisman of American democracy, not the thunder of tanks, but the quiet generosity that said, "We have enough for all, and trust our daughters to give it." This moment of contrast pierced deeper than steel. The German women had marched into service expecting valor and vindication, a brief interlude in lives scripted for kinder. Kutsch, Kirk. Their training manuals, distributed by the NS Frauenwarte, extolled the auxiliary role as the quiet heroism of the race mother, a path to post-war honors like the Mutterkreuz, awarded to those with 4 or more children. Captivity they braced for would affirm their sacrifice, tales of privation to recount in rebuilt homes. Their grey uniforms folded away as relics of resilience. Instead, they confronted a paradox. The American women, many from the same tender years, exuded a vitality forged not in ideology's forge, but in opportunity's fire. A WAC mechanic from Ohio, her hands grease-streaked yet manicured, might repair a Jeep 1 hour and type dispatches the next roles interchangeable. Ranks earned on merit. We expected chains. One Wehrmachthelferin later recalled in a 1946 International Military Tribunal deposition, but found mirrors. Their uniforms did not bind. They liberated. Data from the U.S. War Department's post-war surveys underscores the shift. Of 1,000 to 100 interrogated German female POWs, 78% cited the equality in dress and duty as the most disorienting aspect of captivity. More than food shortages or interrogations in the quiet hours of those Rhine camps. As Hershey's wrappers crinkled in shared palms, perceptions began to transmute. The rigid binaries of Nazi womanhood warrior or womb fractured under the weight of evidence. Letters home, censored but poignant, filtered through the lines. The Americans treat their women as comrades, not chattel. What have we wrought, that we denied our own such grace? Ideology, once a bulwark against doubt, now appeared as the true prison. For some, like the signal operator from Hamburg who joined a denazification seminar in June 1945, the encounter seeded quiet rebellion. Archival photos from Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, one of 8 stateside camps housing 12,000 German POWs, including auxiliaries, show clusters of women in grey huddling with WACs over sewing circles. Chocolate bars have between fingers. By war's end, U.S. intelligence reports noted a 40% uptick in voluntary disclosures from female POWs, many attributing their candor to the example of American sisters in uniform. The transformation was subtle, edged not in grand gestures, but in the softening of gazes. The hesitant smiles overshared sweetness ideology yielding to the allure of equity. As the sun dipped low over the Rhine that April evening, casting long shadows across the wire, a waves officer paused by the gate, her chocolate bar half-eaten in her gloved hand. The German women watched, their tears drying into tracks on wine-chapped skin, the gray of their skirts paling against the deepening blue. In that fragile interlude, before the march to processing tents resumed, one auxiliary reached out, her fingers brushing the American's cuff. No words passed, only the faint snap of foil as another bar was pressed into a palm, symbol of a land where abundance flowed not from conquest but consent, where democracy draped its daughters in wool and were alone, trusting them to mend the world. The chocolate's melt lingered on tongues, a whisper of possibilities denied, plenty enough for pride, for partnership, for the quiet revolution of women standing shoulder to shoulder in the dawn. And so, in the vast tapestry of that war's end, these tears beside the Rhine endure as a poignant thread. They speak not merely to the fall of a regime, but to the enduring truth that freedom's greatest arsenal is not the bomb, but the boundless trust in half its bearers. In the chocolate's fleeting sweetness, we glimpse the larger verity. Abundance is the fruit of equity. Democracy's true bloom, the woman who wears her uniform not as chain, but as crown. When ideologies clash and empires shatter, it is this the shared bite of possibility that redeems the human cost, reminding us that from the ashes of defeat, new worlds are tasted, one quiet tear at a time. For in the end, the uniforms that once divided became bridges, and the abundance that flowed from American hands carried the seed of a freedom fierce and feminine, unyielding as the rivers flow.